Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, Google's data center secrets are finally being revealed, and we'll share the best bits, why the U.S. government is in no position to lecture us about cybersecurity, and how you can still get hacked offline. Then it's a great big batch of your questions, a rockin' roundup, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 220 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We stream this episode live on June 25th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, DigitalOcean, Ting, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Our live stream, why, that's powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. You should go check that out. It's how we do our live streams. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Alan. I am looking forward to our first story today. You and I have speculated a lot on the show. I've read some books about Google on how they've built out their data centers. And since this show started, we've seen an interesting trend like from Facebook, where they've come out and they've talked a lot about their data center designs. We've actually seen some of the hosting providers that we've talked about kind of share their data center setups. Google's always been a big secret, though, huh? And they have an impressive setup.
And they've started to kind of tell us a little bit about it. They just did a talk at the Open Network Summit, and they kind of started to share a little bit of the secret. They say that Google has, for a long time been really into distributed computing and data processing, right? Like the Google file system, MapReduce, Bigtable, the Borg system they have, and all that. From the beginning, they've been known for having great computing infrastructure that was actually built on commodity hardware.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they've required intense data center networking technologies. Right. So they say for the past decade, we've been building our own network hardware and software to connect all of our servers and our data centers together, power their distributed computing and storage platforms. Now they're opening up this powerful and transformative infrastructure for use by external developers with the Google Cloud platform. But they're also opening it up so they can tell us a little bit about it.
That's so kind of what maybe the motive here, though, is for people that are curious about maybe hosting their stuff up on Google's platform. If they maybe share a little bit of the details, people are more comfortable with it, maybe? I think that's where they're going for.
Possibly, although some of it, if it's not a Google secret, then why not share it for everybody?
I guess so, huh? Yeah.
So they say, going back even just 10 years when they were starting to build this, they couldn't buy for any price a data center network that could meet the requirements of their distributed system, right? They had more servers than anybody had ever really imagined before. And they said, managing 1,000 individual network boxes made Google's operations more complex, and, replacing a whole data center's network was too disruptive, right? So every time, they bought the biggest router they could buy and then, connect everything, and then be like, oh, well, finally the vendors come up with an even bigger router so that we have to go and replace that big router with an even bigger router, and it caused them all kinds of problems. So the company started building its own network using generic hardware controlled by software, kind of what eventually became known as software-defined networking. It also used the so-called CLOS topology, which is a mesh architecture with multiple paths between devices.
Okay.
And equipment built with merchant silicon and different kinds of chips that generic white box vendors use. And then the software stack is controlled completely by Google with their own work with the OpenFlow protocol. But basically, they've taken regular switches and connected them together and started using their own protocol, so they can actually make a whole bunch of separate switches act as if they were actually one really big switch. And so at the 2015 Open Networking Summit, they started to reveal for the first time some of the details of the 5 generations of their in-house networking topology and how they've changed over time. So some of this is actually just Google giving away the secret sauce of stuff they used to do, which they've since replaced. But they say that their current generation, which they call Jupiter Fabric,
I like that, man,
can deliver more than 1 petabit per second of total bisection bandwidth. To put that in perspective, that would allow each of 100,000 servers to be exchanging 10 gigabits per second, which is enough to read the entire scanned contents of the Library of Congress in less than 1/10 of a second.
Wow.
Yeah. So say we use a centralized software control stack to manage thousands of switches within the data center, making them effectively act as one large fabric by using that class topology. We build our own software and hardware using silicon we get from vendors, relying less on standard internet protocols and more on custom protocols tailored to their data centers. So they started to invent new protocols for managing this stuff. It kind of reminds me of, I think it's data center TCP that Facebook and others are pushing.
Yeah.
That would move the congestion control from the individual boxes to kind of a centralized monitor or mediator. So what Google's doing isn't data center TCP, but that's what Facebook and others are pushing. But they say putting all of this together, their data center network deliver unprecedented speeds at the scale of entire buildings. They're built for modularity, to be constantly upgraded to meet the insatiable bandwidth demands of the latest generation of their servers. They're managed for availability, so that if any one pod goes down, things don't break. To meet the uptime requirements of some of the most demanding internet services and customers. Right? Everybody flips out if Gmail goes down, or if YouTube doesn't work, the internet is over.
It's a big deal, yeah.
Yeah. Most importantly, our data center networks are shared infrastructure. That means that the same network that power all of Google's internal infrastructure and services also power Google's cloud platform, right? This is the same idea as Amazon with EC2. They built the Amazon Web Services thing to power their infrastructure, and then we're like, oh, well, now we have all this leftover infrastructure that we're not using right now. We could rent it out and make money. Most importantly, our data center networks. Sorry, I just read that. They're also excited about opening this capability up to developers across the world. With the next generation internet service or platform can leverage world-class network infrastructure without having to invent it first. They also say the amount of bandwidth that they have to deliver to our servers is outpaced even Moore's Law. Over the past 6 years, has grown by a factor of 50. In addition to keeping up with computing power, the network will also need higher performance to take advantage of the fast storage technologies they're using now, like flash and non-volatile memory. If you're accessing your storage over the network or just moving stuff to storage, as the storage gets faster, all of a sudden your network demands go faster, right? If you can read off the disk faster, you need to be able to ship it to the other server faster. Right. Otherwise, your flash disks aren't doing you any good. It's kind of like, if you build a NAS or a SAN out of all SSDs, it's like, sure, it's going to be fast, but if it's only got 1 gigabit link to the network, you can saturate that with a couple of spinning hard drives. The SSDs maybe aren't going to make as big a difference there. But they say, sadly, the full details will have to wait until their paper is published at SIGCOMM in August.
Okay. So this is a little bit of a tease, isn't it? A little bit of a tease.
Well, when I started writing it, I was hoping, I was like, the details got to be in here somewhere. And it's like, I just want to see what the hardware looks like. Well, the switching stuff is interesting.
You got a little taste with that. You get a taste with the switches.
Right. And, it was really interesting to see Intel offering a custom chassis that you could build your own switch with that we talked about, I don't know, 6+ months ago. But, I've always been interested in Google's approach on just the server hardware. Back when we used to hear about things like embedding a UPS battery directly in each 2U chassis. So that...
motherboards on a shelf kind of a thing.
Motherboards on a shelf, each one with its own battery. So that you would save the whole AC/DC cycle of going from a UPS back to the computer and so on.
And they would have people. I've heard they've had people walk around with. I think I read this Into the Plex. People walk around with almost like shopping carts, and there's just maybe 100 that fail a day or something like that, and it's just expected. And they just swap them out and put the new one down, and then all of the firmware and all of the software and everything is pushed down over the network to them. So. All right, Mr. Jude, any other thoughts on that particular story?
No, I just have a link to the blog post we started here and so on, and there's some interesting stuff in the comments. But
maybe we'll keep our eyes out.
Looking forward to that paper when it comes out.
We'll watch for that. And if you see it too, maybe submit it to our subreddit, techsnap.reddit.com. That way we don't miss it. All right, well, I want to tell you about something I don't want you to miss. It's a special offer from our friends at Ting that wraps up at about middle of next week. If you go to techsnap.ting.com before June 30th, you can get $50 off your first Ting device. Or if you have a Ting-compatible device, which is going to be a lot of them because Ting has a big GSM and CDMA network. If you have a compatible device, then they're going to give you $50 of service credits. Now, here's what's amazing about that. Ting is only pay for what you use mobile. You just take your minutes, your messages, and your megabytes, whatever you use in those categories, that's what you pay for. It's a flat $6 for that line, and then any applicable taxes. So imagine what $50 could get you. Now, I have 3 phones. Now, I don't use 3 phones all the time. We have an HTC One, an iPhone 5, and I have a 4th phone. We have the Nexus 5, which is currently running, I believe it's currently running Firefox OS or Sailfish OS. And then we have the S6. All of these are on the Ting line, and our bill's around $37, $42, somewhere in that ballpark every single month. Isn't that amazing? That's with all the features you'd expect. Also hotspot tethering, all that stuff. You just turn it on. It's right there. And you also can turn off a device if you don't need to use it for a little while because you're only paying for your usage. And if you throw on a MiFi device on there, again, it's just $6 for that line, and then when you use the MiFi device. And one of the best parts is if you ever get stuck, Ting has no hold customer service. You call 1-855-TING-FTW, and a real human being answers the phone. That's a really nice service. And you know what? Even though I've been using Ting for over 2 years, I've never needed to actually call their customer service because their dashboard freaking rocks. It freaking rocks. You can do all kinds of things with their dashboard because they treat that as sort of like a software platform for the Ting customer. And they rev out updates. They internally develop and iterate on that and then push out new versions. It's a really cool system. Nobody else does management for your mobile like Ting. Also, when you're over at TechSNAP.ting.com, check out their blog. Yeah, this is really neat. Ting is occasionally updating folks on their fiber internet rollout. Ooh. Ting's getting into fiber internet too. They're like, well, let's take all our philosophies about mobile and apply it to fiber internet. And this is a really cool one. They're in Westminster, and in the city of Westminster, they had Westminster, right? Westmore, yeah. They had dark fiber network here, and now check this out. This is brilliant. So Ting comes in and lights up the dark fiber network there, and now Ting's going to manage Ting internet service on there. What a great idea!
Yep.
So there's a lot.
If there was one company I could pick to be an ISP, it would definitely be Ting.
No kidding, right?
How easy they make everything.
Yeah, they really do. And you can just get a taste of that by going to TechSNAP.ting.com, and then on that landing page there, try out that savings calculator. See how much you would save. I've saved over $2,000 in the last 2 years. And if you're a small business, this is an incredible way to get connectivity and mobility out to all of your team for a very, very, very low cost. So great. Check out the For Business section, all about that. TechSNAP.ting.com, and thanks to all of you guys out there for supporting the show by visiting TechSNAP.ting.com. Now, I love the headline, Alan, of the next story. It's something to the effect of why the United States government should not be giving us lessons on cybersecurity or something like that. All right, what's our next story about?
Yeah, so why should anyone trust the U.S. government, what the U.S. government says about cybersecurity when they can't secure the systems that they have full control over?
Okay.
You know, they're out there trying to tell us, the internet's full of bad guys and we got to do stuff about it. And it's like, well, how about starting with your own stuff?
Yeah, clean up your own house first. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is no doubt.
And the big headline there was, when IRS employees can still use the word password as their password, no wonder they got hacked. They say, as I've personally been telling people for a long time, you have to assume the worst until you can prove otherwise, right? Every time there's a breach, you assume they got everything until you can prove that they didn't.
Yeah.
None of this, we don't think they got anything. Crap, because then you have this here. The effect of the massive hack of the Office of Personnel Management continues to ripple through Washington, D.C., as it seems every day we get more information about how the theft of millions of government workers' most private information is somehow worse than it seemed the day before.
Yeah, it has just been growing, hasn't it?
New rule. If you read about a hack of a government or corporate database that sounds pretty bad, you can guarantee it will be followed shortly thereafter by another story detailing how the same hack was actually much worse. Or much worse than previously admitted, is the phrase they use there.
Yeah, it does seem to be the case, huh?
It'd be one thing if this if this incompetence was exclusive to the OPM, if it's, just the one department wasn't doing things properly. But despite the government trying to scare private citizens with warnings of, a cyber Armageddon or the cyber Pearl Harbor for years, they failed to take even the most basic steps to prevent massive data loss from their own systems, right? 80 to 90% of cyber attacks can be prevented or mitigated with basic steps like encrypting the data, patching your software, and using strong passwords. But it's obvious that the government isn't doing any of those three things.
It's so basic. It really is as basic as that.
Yes, or multi-factor authentication. Everybody with a cell phone can do that now.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
There's services out there too to make it pretty straightforward to tie it into your existing system. I mean, it adds such a layer of security.
We just highlighted a story on BSD Now this week. Episode just got released like a second ago. I saw Rikai in the chat room talking about how you can set up two-factor authentication for your SSH, or how you can set it up for multi-factor, so that you have to use, if most people log in with SSH with a key now, right? But you can actually, in your SSH config, force it to allow you to use a key and a password. Because while the password, you can put a password on the key, that's checked locally on your machine, not the server you're logging into. So the server you're logging into doesn't know whether if you've encrypted your key or not, or how secure your key is. So on the server, you can say, hey, on top of the key, you also need a password, right? Provide me 2 things or you can't come on.
Yeah.
And then it talks about mixing that also, maybe any 2 of 3. I need the password, a SSH key, and a Google Authenticator.
Yeah.
And things like that.
Yeah, interesting.
It's like 2 lines of config file.
Come on, people.
Exactly. But to say, the agency that's been singled out for the most criticism, obviously, is the Department of Homeland Security. They're supposed to be setting the example for everybody, and instead they're the worst. The agency that is supposed to be in charge of securing all other government systems, whereas a New York Times report showed that they're not applying basic password complexity rules. So people have passwords like password or other, hilariously terrible mistakes that they make in their IT infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's like in modern versions of Windows with Active Directory, you have to specifically turn off password complexity requirements. They're on by default. But instead of addressing its own problems and writing a bill that would force the government to upgrade all of its legacy systems, instead they've implemented stronger encryption implementing stronger encryption across federal agencies and implement basic cybersecurity best practices. Instead, they're pushing for dangerous information sharing legislation.
Yes, thank you.
That will just end up with more of citizens' private data being in the hands of the government.
And then when they get breached, it gets leaked, and none of the companies that shared it are liable because the cyber sharing information provides indemnification for the companies that provide information. So there's no recourse for the user, the consumer, etc.
And then to make it worse, the FBI wants tech companies to install backdoors that would give the government access to all encrypted communications, thereby leaving everyone more vulnerable to hackers, not less. It's like, I don't understand how people can believe that there's such thing as a backdoor that only one person would have access to. If there's a backdoor that the FBI can use, it also means anybody else can use it. These are 2 solutions that won't fix any of these glaring problems that are staring us in the face.
Yeah.
And
so why are they pushing them so
hard? All this
hard?
happening is making this worse.
But they still push them pretty hard.
Yep. I don't know why. It's just making things worse.
Yes, and we have a story in the roundup that is sort of related to this as far as updates go and patching and security and a popular vendor. I
guess we might as well throw that out now. The U.S. Navy just spent $9.1 million on a contract that could end up being for $30 million to get security updates for Windows XP and Server 2003, because apparently they still have as many as 100,000 computers that are still running Windows XP and Server 2003.
Yeah. So a couple of things.
They're paying at least they're paying to still get the security updates, I suppose. Now, it's better than just not paying to get the security updates.
Perhaps it is more economical to invest in the XP system than it is to replace it.
It could be. And at the same time, the bigger question is, XP's been end of life for over a year. What have they been doing before now for security updates? And
like I've said before, and I know they could be writing specific patches, but you got to wonder, sometimes Microsoft is writing patches that could probably apply to other people that have XP, but they're not giving them to anybody. So Microsoft is sitting on fixes for a critical operating system in critical positions, ones that have consumer information like point of sales machines, and they're just not releasing them because you're not paying up, even though they've written the code.
Yeah, but at the same time, They announced they give people 5 years of warning that XP was going away.
I know.
It's not like they just decided that XP is not supported anymore if you don't pay us. It was like, we've offered you this upgrade path for the last 5 years or more even. It's been a lot longer than that now.
Mm-hmm. That is very true. All right, Mr. Jr.
I don't know why we have this culture of not updating.
Because it's scary. It's scary, and businesses resist change and want to mitigate risk as much as possible.
I suppose.
Yeah.
But the best way to mitigate risk is to do your development on the latest version so that it's not a surprise when stuff changes.
Well, there's.
You got to be ahead of this curve.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my big point here was that the solution to cybersecurity is not something you buy from a vendor, right? There are plenty of examples of large networks out there that are actually fairly well secured. But, there's even more examples of government and corporate networks that are horribly insecure, right? But again, it's not that security is something you can go buy from a vendor. It's not really a question of money that's not being spent on it. It's really just applying the same stuff security experts have been telling us for decades, right? Things like need to know. You have some sensitive data like customer credit card information or, background checks on people with their medical records attached and so on. How about making it so only people that actually need that data today have access to it? Right? Rather than just throwing it on a file share somewhere that everybody has access to.
Or SharePoint.
Yeah. Locking it down so only people that actually need it right now have access to it. Or patching, right? Software has flaws. These flaws get fixed and then they become public. Or sometimes the other way around. And that's when we have a 0 day, right? There's a flaw and everybody finds out about it and then we get it fixed a couple days later. But if you don't patch your software quickly, you increase the chance that the flaw will be used against you. It's not that complicated. Install the patch. It's why they make them.
I know, Alan. This has been your whipping boy the whole show, and it still doesn't sink in.
Strong authentication, right? Password complexity requirements can be annoying, especially when they're too vague, right? Like, often you go to a website to put in a password and it's like, oh, you need a number, a lowercase letter, an uppercase letter, and a symbol. It's like, I just generated a password this long with LastPass and it's not accepting it because it doesn't have a $sign in it somewhere. It's like, really, we really need better ways of detecting password complexity and, being less annoying. But when you use Password Manager, it's not that hard to have all the requirements. But anyway. The bigger problem there is when systems don't securely store the password, right? If they're not doing a proper cryptographic hash on it, then, you get the stupid things like, sorry, your password can't be more than 14 characters long. It's like, why the hell not?
Yeah.
It's a hash.
Yeah.
If you store it as a hash, it's always going to be this long, no matter what. It'll be a fixed size in your database. And people won't be able to tell how long my password is.
It's kind of a giveaway, too, when I see those kind of things. I'm like, oh, crap. Crap.
So they're obviously storing my password in plain text. Then we just talked about multi-factor authentication. By requiring more than one factor to authenticate someone, you ensure that the attacker couldn't just shoulder surf, keylog, phish, or otherwise get someone's password, because when they go to use it, they'll only have the password, not the other part. Right? The Google Authenticator or the whatever other factors you end up using. Or encryption. This one can be hard as many of the solutions turn out to be not good enough, right? It's like lots of people nowadays are like, oh, the hard drive on my laptop's encrypted. It's like, that's fine if someone steals your laptop or whatever. But what if someone gains access to your laptop while it's powered on and you're logged in, right? If you leave it and go to the bathroom and forgot to lock it, or, there's lots of ways that, someone can get access to your computer, right? If they do an exploit against your computer and are running a program on your computer while you're logged in, they can access all your data as if it wasn't encrypted. And so what value is the encryption giving you in that case? So sensitive data should be offline when it's not in use, right? I understand like your whole operating system, that doesn't make sense. You're going to have that encrypted and when you're logged in, it's accessible, whatever. But if you have a giant database of credit cards and you're not using it right now, how about unmounting that so that you'd have to re-enter the password to get access to it? Now, if somebody compromises the machine, the data is not available to them at that time. Stuff like that. Or logging, right? Everybody's like, oh, yeah, lots of logging. It's like, well, if your logs don't actually have the information you need in them, they're not very much use. But knowing who accessed what and when is very useful, even just after the fact. The NSA's biggest problem with the Snowden leak is they weren't sure which files he actually stole. It's like, well, if you knew every time everyone accessed a file, you probably could have detected it sooner because, hey, why is some guy accessing more files than in one day than is normal? But also, you would know which files he touched and which ones he didn't. And maybe it'll help you stop the baddies from making off with your data. you can spot them while they're still trying to read the stuff before they even know which ones they want to steal. And then also auditing, right? If you have a security appliance like the Fudu that we've talked about a number of times, you only allow access to your secure system or servers through that Fudu. And that means every access to everything is recorded on video, right? And that way, there's no other way to access those files. And then every contractor or administrator or whatever that goes to touch anything on any of those servers is recorded, right? And you have separate logins for every person, so you know exactly who did what when, and you have it on video. It seems like a pretty good system to me. Or, as we've discussed in TechSNAP episode 214 a couple of weeks ago, I guess 6 weeks ago, there are other techniques you can use, right? We went through that whole report from the Australian version of the NSA where they're like, if you just did the top 5 things off this list of 30 things you can do to secure your network, 90% of all exploits wouldn't happen. And, the big one there was the whitelisting software. Maybe it doesn't make sense to whitelist software on every machine, but, if you're going to have a machine that has sensitive stuff on it, how about making it so that malware won't be able to run because only the approved applications with the approved signatures would be able to run?
Right.
But the key there is deciding what protections to use and where and how to do it while generating the least amount of user resistance, which was, I think, one of the most important parts of that report to me was the fact that they actually considered that and had it as one of the metrics on the table. Right, in that big table of all the different things, it was like how hard it would be to do, how much it would cost to keep it up, but also how much your users are going to hate you for doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, user acceptance factor. How low is that? How high is it? Yeah, because the higher and lower depends on how much they actually use that. And that's like one of the biggest problems we ran into even with problems like with TrueCrypt. We'd have users try to use TrueCrypt on their laptops, and if they'd have to enter another password after they logged into their desktop, that'd be too inconvenient for them. And, you kind of have to tell them tough luck.
Yeah. Some things you just have to force the users to live with it. But oftentimes, it'd be like, okay, then don't access the encrypted data, right? You don't want them to enter that password every time. Mm-hmm. It's just like you own this. This is a good way for them to be like, I'm doing this because I'm about to access the encrypted data, and as soon as I'm done, I'm going to unmount it, and then it's going to be unavailable again. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of stuff we were just talking about.
Yep, exactly. All right. Well, Mr. Jude, coming up in just a little bit, Google's Project Zero actually nets another 15 zero-day vulnerabilities, at least vulnerabilities. I don't know if they're 0 days. We're going to talk about it. We'll find out the details on that first. I want to talk about DigitalOcean, the next sponsor for the TechSNAP program. DigitalOcean is a great solution if you need some infrastructure on demand. You need something permanent, something short-term, something just to learn on. DigitalOcean checks all of those boxes. They're a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way for you to spin up your own cloud server. I want you to grab our promo code. It's SNAPOcean. SNAPOcean. Grab that. It'll give you a $10 credit. And I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we go here. And it's great, too, because you can try out DigitalOcean, no credit card. You just use SNAPOcean to get that $10 credit. And here's why it's perfect. Because in less than 55 seconds, you can get started with a $5 a month droplet. They'll give you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. I love how straightforward DigitalOcean's pricing is too. So for $5 a month, you get all that. Then you step up to the next dollar point, $10, and then you get everything bumps up. 1 gigabyte, 30 gigabyte of SSD, 2 terabytes of transfer. And did you notice something?
That's a lot of transfer.
I know, and all SSD backed too, which is really great. Mm-hmm. And they have data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, London, and Germany. Like that one in Germany has 40 gigabit E connections to each hypervisor. Their fastest SSDs yet. That's really slick. And what I love is not just how fast you can get going, but how awesome their control panel is. They have a super simple, intuitive control panel that lets you get everything done you need to manage your droplets, take snapshots, set up templates, one-click application deployments, destroy the machine, transfer it to another account, which is really cool if you're setting like up a WordPress blog for somebody and they want to ship it off to them. Mm-hmm. That's all great. You can do all of those things through the AI, through their API as well. So the things you would use their website for, all of it's available through their straightforward API that they recently revved. And then, last but not least, they have great options to choose from the operating systems, from some of the best Linux eyes out there, including the new Core OS and Fedora 22. They also have FreeBSD available. So there's a bunch of great selections out there, all managed with their awesome dashboard, and they have incredible documentation to back it all up. Alan and I love the Bacula backup server, and they currently have a guide up at DigitalOcean on how to set up and install Bacula server on Ubuntu 14.04, and also one on PHP My Admin and how to actually secure PHP my admin.
Yes.
DigitalOcean has great tutorials because they pay people and they have full-time content editors. In fact, they have open positions right now at DigitalOcean. Go there. Remember our promo code SNAPOcean. Try it out. Get familiar with their interface, and why not submit for a job too? Because they've got some open positions. And
make sure you mention that you're a TechSNAP viewer when you apply for a job.
Yeah.
It'll help.
It will. It'll give you a little bit of a heads up, I bet. Just a little bit of an edge. DigitalOcean.com. Use that promo code SNAPOcean, and a huge thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. We really appreciate it. And it's now my go-to Linux on-demand infrastructure. Like when we need to spin something up, boom. Like we just needed a temporary FTP server for the weekend. It was great for that. And then we decided, you know what? It's so straightforward. It's so simple. It's so it's like almost, it's at $5. It almost feels free. It almost feels free at $5 for a server that powerful. So we left it up, and now we're using it for intermediate file transfers back and forth for quick things. It's really cool. There's a lot of uses. I also have OwnCloud up there. I have a Minecraft server up there, BitTorrent sync up there. I mean, the Quasal Core server up there. There's a lot of things I'm using it for. DigitalOcean.com. SNAPOcean gives you a $10 credit. Now, I like this story here. We're getting some serious results out of Google's Project Zero, which not only sounds cool, but is actually discovering some serious flaws. So what do we have this week, Alan?
Yeah, so this one is a researcher whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce because look at that.
Wow.
Has discovered 50 new remote code execution vulnerabilities, mostly having to do with the Adobe font driver. It says the most interesting of these flaws includes one that affects Adobe Reader and the Windows kernel itself that appears to get past all known exploit defenses. The extremely powerful primitive provided by the vulnerability, together with the fact that it affects all supported versions of both Adobe Reader and Microsoft Windows, thus makes it possible to create an exploit chain leading to a full system compromise
there you go.
with just a single bug. Makes it one of the most interesting security issues I've discovered so far. I also say that any of the 15 vulnerabilities discovered by the researcher pulled from his old but seemingly unexplored area of exploits could trigger remote code execution or privilege escalation in Adobe Reader or the Windows kernel. And he's got a blog post that goes on about it, but if you see the next link there, there's a video, and this video just kind of underscores the point. So it starts with him just firing up a Windows VM or whatever and showing you this is Windows 8.1 and it's got all the latest patches installed. And then this is Adobe Reader 11.0.10, which is all the latest patches. And then he just clicks open, opens the proof of concept.pdf, and the font renderer pops up, and then calculator pops up. It's like, that's unusual.
Yeah.
Well, then he runs Process Explorer, and you can see that calculator calc.exe was started by Adobe Reader. And if you go into the details, you can see that calculator.exe is actually running as the system user, which is even more powerful than administrator. You have access to do things even the administrator is not allowed to do. So that simple, basically opening that PVDF could allow someone to do anything they wanted to your computer.
Why? How does a font get kernel level privileges? How does that happen?
It's it's pretty crazy. There's a couple, but apparently it has to do with PostScript char string security. And so basically, there's 15 vulnerabilities here, and you see that most of them affect Windows and Adobe as well, but also some other software as well. And it basically goes on to describe how you can just use this. I'm trying to remember what it's called now. But basically, PostScript is basically a language that describes how to draw stuff for printing, and it has a vulnerability in it. So yeah, if you go down into the slides, you can see he just puts this big long string of gibberish in there, and it allows you to do the blend operation. And with that, you can do a basically unbounded stack access, and basically just do whatever you want. And in their case, it was be able to run. The classic example for every exploit is make it for calculator, because that basically means you can run any code you want. So, yeah, it's crazy stuff. And we're starting to see patches for that stuff happening.
Wow, I mean, this is definitely a new angle for taking advantage of Adobe stuff. Yikes. So, geez, Alan. So basically, you just have to have what to be vulnerable to this. You need to be running Windows and have Adobe Reader and have it be 32-bit.
There's actually a version that seems to work on 64-bit as well.
Okay. All right. And there's 15 different vulnerabilities that have been pulled from this.
Yeah, and that was just the scariest of them.
As a result of Project Zero, huh? Cool.
Yes. And on the Project Zero page for it, they have the timeline of when they found it and when they notified, and it's been the 90 days, so they're disclosing it and so on.
Yeah.
But Project Zero has also published a bunch of other interesting vulnerabilities recently.
Okay.
The first one is Owning Internet Printing, a case study in modern software exploitation, which actually found some flaws in CUPS, the open source printing platform used on OS X, Linux, FreeBSD, and so on.
Yeah.
Basically, its internal string allocation could allow you to do stuff you shouldn't be able to do, and basically exploit the internet printing functionality and do whatever you wanted. So in the background, it's internet printing is really just HTTP modified a little bit.
Yeah.
And so they're able to do whatever they want.
And a lot of people, not a lot, but some people have IPP open over the firewalls, through the firewall, so that way a remote user can print or something like that. So that's one of the things people sometimes let in. And because it's not super, super popular and common, I think some people think they get away with it.
But they also say this reflected cross-site scripting attack can be used to inject attacker-supplied JavaScript cross-origin bootstrapping exploitation strings into the vulnerable CUPS scheduler interface, not directly reachable from the network. So, for example, if the CUPS instance is bound to localhost on a machine, then you could trigger something in a user's web browser to exploit their CUPS, even though it's not exposed to the internet. Basically, load some JavaScript in their browser when they visit your website that would actually make their browser go to the CUPS instance running on their local machine. So in their example, they're using a Ubuntu machine, and by visiting a certain website, it would exploit the Ubuntu machine's CUPS running on localhost not exposed to the internet. Yep. And the string reference count bug was originally introduced in CUPS 1.2.0 sometime in 2006. All versions since then are affected. Given the large number of effective versions, the vast majority of basically every unpatched CUPS instance in the world probably has this vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because the chances of you running a version of CUPS from before 2006 is pretty unlikely.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a pretty popular one. I mean, there's a lot of Macs out there now, and there's a lot of Linux rigs running CUPS. So that's a lot of... I bet we're going to see a lot of patches roll out.
The even worse one is there are a lot of routers that run CUPS now so they can do network printing, right? Those little routers with a USB port, and you plug a printer into it. Yeah, so there's all kinds of embedded devices running CUPS that you don't even know about.
Yeah.
And also, CUPS is used for some other stuff. So oftentimes, if you have software that's able to generate PDFs or something, it might actually have most of CUPS bundled into it. And all kinds of ridiculous stuff like that. Yeah, basically, I've seen software I was installing on my server pulling CUPS, and it's like, I don't even have a printer. What's this? But they go into talk about disabling the web interface to CUPS and some other stuff to try to reduce the problem. But Apple did the fix in April.
Oh, okay.
And then, but the open source CUPS didn't have a release until June 8th.
So fairly recently.
Project Zero found and reported the bug to Apple in March, on March 20th. On April 16th, Apple shipped the fix as part of OS X 10.10.3. And then on June 8th, CUPS did its official release of 2.0.3. And then June 18th, Google's disclosure plus 90 days time was up. And so the next day on June 19th, they published their Project Zero blog post here. They also say that as part of CUPS 2.0.3, which is the one that fixed the problem, and the 2.1 beta, those contain several prescient implementation changes that limit the risk of impact of similar bugs in the future. So the CUPS people have actually gone about making it so not just fixing this vulnerability, but making sure similar ones are harder to do in the future.
Good.
Yeah, they say configuration value strings are now logically separated from the string pool, allocated using stirdup instead of their other interface that they were using before. And the dynamic loading environment variables are blocked when CUPS is running as root so that you can't inject your own code into CUPS.
Good.
Also, the localhost listener is removed when web interface is disabled, starting in the 2.1 beta only, though.
Okay.
But that's that one. The other interesting one that I saw...
From Project Zero?
Yeah. Was, dude, where's my heap?
Of course.
So... in Windows, in Windows 8, Microsoft introduced the new high entropy bottom-up randomization, which is an expansion on ASLR that basically introduces a 1 terabyte variance in the start address of the heap. So they're just, the giant terabyte range, and they just pick a random place in it. It's making it much harder to do workarounds for ASLR.
Sure.
And stuff. And basically, because the stack could be anywhere in there, it made it a lot harder to find it than, when it was the typical smaller address space. However, but a technique that is commonly used in browser exploitation is called heap spraying. And so where you just keep doing it until you can find the stuff you're spraying in the heap. But by having a 1 terabyte variance, it means it's very unlikely you'll be able to do it. The problem is Microsoft or Internet Explorer also introduced another mitigation called Memory Protector in order to prevent the exploitability of use after free vulnerabilities. However, the mitigations are not meant to be related, but they actually have unexpected consequences when combined. So Memory Protector can be abused to actually bypass the high entropy bottom-up randomization. So it's possible to use a timing attack on the Memory Protector to reveal the offset used by the high entropy bottom-up randomization, thus completely bypassing it and making it useless.
Jeez, no way.
Yeah. So the second system Microsoft tried to add actually takes away all the usefulness of the first one.
I love that. I love that from my deep evil place inside me.
Yep. Yeah, it says Memory Protector works by preventing the object from being freed if its address can be found in the stack somewhere. If Memory Protector is enabled for certain classes, deleting won't free the memory right away. It will just zero it out once the size of these freed but not really freed objects reach a certain threshold. The Memory Protector will scan the stack and clean up after them. But apparently it gives away the offset of the 1 terabyte variance and therefore makes it useless.
Well, that's a heck of an update.
They also mentioned that on February 5th, 2 weeks after the researchers sent this report to Microsoft, HP security researchers also announced that they had found a mitigation bypass, or they had received a mitigation bypass bounty from Microsoft, in addition to other attacks that mentioned that the attacker can use Memory Protector as an oracle to completely bypass ASLR. And so it leads them to believe that somebody might have actually found something similar in their own research, separate from his.
Yeah, that's interesting. Sometimes people come to those same conclusions around the same time.
Yeah. There's also 2 other interesting ones. The one is analysis and exploitation of ESET, which is an antivirus program. And the question there is, do we really understand the risk versus benefit trade-offs of using security software? Because oftentimes they're doing systems they're doing things to kind of change how your system works. And they have
such access, too. They have deep access to your system.
And so sometimes they could actually be adding more vulnerabilities than they're protecting you from.
In fact,
the last one there
was a story this week. I think it was this week, right? Maybe we put it in the roundup. I can't remember that the NSA and GCHQ, new documents came out from the Edward Snowden trove that GCHQ and NSA were specifically going after Kaspersky Labs and DSET because they went after Kaspersky and ESET because they have software that gets full privileges to these machines, and if you can compromise that software and ride that privilege bandwagon, you're in.
Yeah, there was another story how the Israeli government had hacked one of the antivirus vendors, but I don't think it said which one. And then the last one was Inconsolable, which was developing a sandbox escape chain for Chrome on Windows by getting out of certain job control stuff.
A leaky
but
sandbox.
All of those are fairly recent. Yeah. So using a flaw in Windows to be able to break out of the Chrome sandbox.
Google's like, damn it, Microsoft. Damn it. Get your crap together. Wow, good one. So look at Project Zero. They're really pulling some weight, aren't they? Got to give it. They really seem to be producing. This is the second or third time we've done an update where they found some good stuff. Any other thoughts on that, Alan?
Nope, that's about it for that one.
All right, well, I'll give you something I have thoughts on. That's IX Systems. Go to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. They are huge advocates for open source, and that's why they're going to build the best servers in the industry for your open source solution. And they have great pre-purchase consultation that really works. It's not something you're going to want to avoid. It's something you're going to want to embrace. On-time delivery, servers built to meticulous quality, white glove support, and they run on those awesome Intel processors. And something else you might appreciate if you're shipping these out to a remote data center, they do burn-in testing before they ship them to you. I know that's something Alan likes, and see, sometimes you never even visit the data center he's sending servers to. Isn't that true? You never really have to go there.
Yeah, I've never been to the one in Portland where the server that this live stream is going to is at.
So that's why it's nice that they do a little testing before they ship it out, right?
Yep. Well, also, the way their warranty system worked. Yeah, when one of the hard drives in the RAID Z array died, it was like, okay, we'll ship you a new one, and we'll fill out all the extra paperwork so that it goes to the data center and gets installed in the right server without you having to go be there to supervise it.
I like this blog post they just recently posted up too. They talk about EMC's VIPR system and ask if it's really open. They have a really good perspective on this because they've been dealing with open source storage solutions, since the beginning. Mm-hmm. This is in their DNA. So they got a great post about that if you're curious.
A lot of companies are now all trying to, we're all open source too.
Open, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's like, they have this list of things. It's like, be serious about your commitment to open source. Actually open source stuff and, actually become part of the community, right?
And contribute.
Oftentimes the other problem companies that try to do open source do is that, once a year they'll drop a new version of something and then you'll never hear from them again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. It's like, that's not really open source. That's just dropping your code on everybody.
They have an amazing
open source is about the community and everything around it, not just the code being available.
Look at this thing. Yes. It just slid by. I want to go back to that. What I don't even know what this thing is called. Come on, show it to me. This thing right there. It's got Intel Xeon E5 260VE. 4 servers in this thing, 2 redundant power supplies. So 2 servers there, 2 servers there in one chassis.
That's the Twin 2X or whatever it's called. And basically, in a 2U, you get 4 servers that are completely independent, and they share 2 redundant power supplies.
That's so awesome. And then they have things like that all the way down to the FreeNAS Mini for your small business or home office. And they have these machines that are just packed full of disk. These are really cool.
Yeah, there's the quad version. There's a 4U tall system that has 8 complete servers in it.
Ooh, fancy. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. Go check them out, won't you? ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. That lets them know we sent you. And also they have a white paper that you can grab if you need to grease the wheels up the chain to try to switch over to a much better hardware vendor. Hey, Alan, while we're talking about open source and BSD-like things, probably we should mention, like you teased earlier, episode 95 of the BSD Now program is out. BitROP Group Therapy. That's a good one, Alan.
Yes, great interview with the sysadmin lead architect at Groupon and how they manage their undisclosed but suggested to be more than 10,000 FreeBSD servers.
Woo-wee. Check it out, episode 95. This is the midway point of the TechSNAP program. So if you want to get a little bit more Alan Jute's face after this show, just go download the HD version. That way it's in all of the definitions we have available. And by the time we're done with this show, that download, I'm sure, will be finished. You can find that over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. It's episode 95 of the BSD Now program. But with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, submitting something on our subreddit, which you might have, techsnap.reddit.com. And our first email comes in from Sam. Alan, buckle yourself up. He says, "Hi guys, I just listened to TechSNAP 219, that was last week's episode, where you mentioned the major data corruption bug that can happen in conjunction with certain Samsung SSDs with the newest firmware version running on Linux. Although, maybe it's not Linux's fault. I have one of the affected drives, the Samsung 840 Pro, but I think I'm safe because I've never updated the firmware, which is currently at a rather old revision. Additionally, I'm running XFS with with the discard option, not extended 4, like all of the reports I've read. Now, I'm not clear if the problem arises when using any kind of trim command on this device or just the queued trim command. Would I be safer in disabling altogether the discard option in etcfs tab and the weekly FS trim job on cron? And if I do that, should I also add the no CQ option to my grub boot, where you force the libata to use no CQ, which I think is no queuing, to the boot options? Is there any other hidden process in Ubuntu that will run trim that I don't expect it? Thanks for all the additional insight. I don't entirely understand this issue and possibly the risk of my situation, but he sounds like he's pretty afraid of trim with that Samsung 840 Pro.
Yeah. If you're that concerned, turning trim off will do something for you. I know that the Linux kernel got a patch in May to blacklist those drives as far as the feature that causes the problem, which I think is the trim command going in the NCQ or native command queue. Completely disabling NCQ will probably hurt performance on all your other operations.
So no is
normally the general
So-
idea is NCQ on a regular SATA drive is basically a queue of up to 32 commands. So you tell the drive a bunch of things you want it to do, and it can reorder them and do them in whatever it wants. And basically asynchronously you say, "Hey drive, I need you this, and this," and then it tells you when each one of those is done.
So in other words, then
if
if he sets that in his grub boot that libata force no NCQ, then he's good.
It could hurt performance.
But he's avoiding this firmware problem.
I'm not sure. I don't completely understand the firmware bug or the problem.
So
with
it might not be
Samsung
worth it then if it's going to hurt performance and he's got an old version of the firmware.
I would say the problem is definitely with trim. So disabling trim will probably be less likely to cause problems than disabling NCQ.
Okay.
So you want a new enough Linux kernel that it actually has the drive on the blacklist so that the driver knows not to try to do trim that way.
Yeah.
And either way, possibly disabling trim will help, although that will eventually degrade the performance of the drive. Although that maybe, every so often you take a backup and then you could run that weekly FS trim where it would trim all the stuff just at once instead of, during normal use.
So one of the things that he mentioned that we pointed out in the reports is it also doesn't seem to be affecting anything but Extended 4, right? So he's also...
Well, no, if it depends which... There were many reports. Remember, there was one that was about, RAID on ext4.
Right.
The one about trim doesn't care about what file system
right.
it is.
That's what I was thinking of. Right. Yep. Right.
Trim doesn't care which file system it is. It will, the bug is that it was trimming the wrong block or something. Right. And I don't know that I've read enough that actually explains exactly what the problem was that was causing it to delete the wrong section of files, but that will have nothing to do with what file system you're using. So, yeah, you might be best off disabling trim until somebody figures out what the hell's going on. Or just use ZFS with redundancy and recover if the drive accidentally deletes something it's not supposed to.
I like that option too. All right, Eric writes in with our next question: to sync or delta sync or not to delta sync? Hello, Chris and Alan. He said, I'd really like to find an open source private sync solution for my personal use to lessen my reliance on the cloud. I'm really liking OwnCloud, but it doesn't do delta file sync. I understand there may be many efficiencies gained by using a solution that only syncs the changes. Like with bitmaps and JPEGs. I really like your value and your understanding of technology. So, however you explain it, I would love for you to talk about how file deltas work on large files, encrypted files, compressed zip files, and other file formats. How does a binary make up these different file types actually change when the file is modified? Could you also talk about the pros and cons of the different delta algorithms that exist, like rsync or syncthing or others? Even compare these solutions with maybe, say, ZFS? What do you think, Alan? Want to take a shot at any of that?
So the biggest one, rsync's delta algorithm is very good, but some of the biggest question is, like, obviously he said one of the examples of where delta compression doesn't make sense is a JPEG, because when you change something it kind of cascades and affects the whole file.
Yeah.
And that's very true. The other thing is, how often does a JPEG actually change? If you take a picture, other than maybe editing it in Photoshop or GIMP or something, why else would a JPEG ever change? And so if your files are all JPEGs that are never going to change, then a delta algorithm is not going to do you any good. Delta algorithm works really good if you're updating, say, source code, which is text files where you might add and remove chunks of text, but where most of the file stays the same. But oftentimes, rsync and similar algorithms are actually slower, because what you end up doing is reading the entire contents of every file on both sides and comparing them and then deciding what to ship.
Yeah. That can be a bit of a CPU hog, too.
Right, whereas you can end up being a lot faster. You just say, give me every file that's been modified in the last 2 days and ship it over. So it really depends on your types of files and how often they're changing and how much they're changing. Right, if a file's being mostly changed, then shipping the whole thing will make a difference. A delta algorithm is not going to help you if almost the entire content of the file is changed. If you're just adding a little bit to the end of a file and the file's in plain text or something, then yes, a delta algorithm makes sense there. But like you said, the problem is, when you have a zip file, because of the way the compression works, if you change any of the files in the zip file, it ends up completely changing the whole file, basically. And so, for example, Word docs are actually now a zip file containing a bunch of XML and other stuff. So they're not like before where you would actually maybe get a good delta on them. Now, most likely, if you change very much the content of a Microsoft Word doc, it actually just becomes a completely different compressed archive. And your delta algorithm is not going to basically gain anything from trying to do a delta on it. It's going to end up reshipping the entire file anyway. So now you just did reading the file on both sides to compare them first for no reason.
He asked for our final word on whether deltas are really add much value to a sync solution, and or
that really comes down to how much are your files changing and what kind of files are they.
Yep. Yeah, and
if most of your change is brand new files, then delta is not helping you at all. How often are you going back and changing the contents of an existing file? And when you do that, depending on the file format, is that file substantially the same, or is it mostly different now? And this is where ZFS comes in, because he mentioned that one in there. With ZFS, basically, it doesn't have to do any of that, right? Normally, with an rsync, you have to crawl through every directory in the set that you want to ship over, and look at each file and decide and all that. With ZFS, all it does is take the date of the last time it replicated and find every block that's been modified since that date and ship it over. So it can do that like instantly and just saturate your gigabit network immediately to do that. And that's why ZFS replication is so much faster than something like rsync.
All right, I was trying to think if there's any other good comparisons. Like, I like Dropbox's way of syncing, but I use OwnCloud quite a bit.
I don't know what their delta algorithm is.
No,
I don't think they publish that.
No.
TechSNAP has a cool one where Colin's written a couple of papers on it, but
okay. That might be worth checking out, too. All right, Paper D from the IRC writes in about changing domain name registrars and maximizing email uptime. Says, hey, guys, thanks for the great show. So I'm searching around for this, but I haven't come up with any really good solutions yet. I'm migrating my domain to a new registrar, but my domain has my email address, and I'd like to lose as little email as possible during the transition. How can I maximize the uptime of my email while changing registrars? I realize that there will be and have to be some downtime, but I'd like to make it as minimal as possible.
Well, it depends. If your email is not hosted at your domain name registrar, there can be zero downtime. Normally, when you transfer a domain from one registrar to another, there's the option to just leave the name servers the way they were. And as long as your name servers weren't also hosted by your registrar, the domain won't. You'll have zero downtime, right? Your mail server will still point to the same IP address as it always has, and the domain will just switch.
How much do you want to bet, though?
I moved a bunch. But yes, a lot of people take advantage of the free name server hosting.
And some of them just set it up most of them just set that up automatically for you.
Yeah, and if you don't have a big reason to use your own name server or don't already have your own name server, that's what you're going to be doing.
So what would be his steps then? What do you think?
Then if you get your own name server to prevent this issue in the future and so on, you can get it set up with all the records ahead of time so that as soon as the name server switch happens, your email still works, and then you can do the domain transfer after that or whatever. Although, because most of the problem with letting your domain registrar do it is that the place you're transferring to probably won't have the ability to let you set up the zone before the transfer so that when it transfers over, it already has the data.
Is there a way he could, this is hard because the domain name itself is changing. So there's not even a way to have the mail go to a mail route type storage place because there's just going to be a period of time where that lookup doesn't work.
Well, if you have your own name servers, there won't be a period like that.
Right. So could he do that first?
It can, although sometimes it's hard to change a domain right before you're going to transfer it and so on. But yeah, something like that's an option to, or at least have a backup MX. And if you set the DNS TTL high enough, then people that have already emailed you maybe, but that's certainly not going to help.
That might be something that helps though.
Not really. Yeah. But if you have your own domains DNS servers, then this is not a problem. And so you might look at doing something like that. A service like DNS Made Easy or something to let you do it. Or even, I think, Afraid.net offers free hosting, I think.
Yeah, there is some.
DNS.
Yep, there is some. Yep, there's free ones.
And you can do something like that. And then that way, those name servers will point somewhere that's not either of the registrars. And then during the transfer, you just say, keep my existing name servers and no downtime.
Boom. All right, Janitor1 writes in asking about a question regarding managing keys. I need to back up and I'm looking at using TarSNAP. This got me thinking about keys, though, since their security and whereabouts will be paramount. Otherwise, I lose access to my backup. So I figured I would turn to the experts. How do you store your keys safely? Storing them on a server would definitely maintain their integrity, and that would, by definition, also make them more accessible. So how many keys do you guys have? You know, he's got OpenVPN, Mumble, VPSs, TarSNAP, and things like that, and he wants to know what it is that we do. He says he's fairly new to keys in general. I don't have expert knowledge on the topic, but I think you can see where I'm going here. Please enlighten me on the best practices and considerations for maintaining my keys.
The TarSNAP key, I actually have mine printed out on paper and put away off-site because you can't get any of your backups back without that key. Right. So in addition to, I use a separate key for each machine so that one machine doesn't do the other.
Good idea there. Yeah.
And so on. And then, so the key for my main home server, it has the keys to the other ones locked away. But the key for it is on paper and lives at my parents' house in case something happens to my house. And that way I can always get back and get in my TarSNAP, and I back up all my other keys into my TarSNAP.
Clever. So
although obviously, maybe I should have a second backup too, because something could happen to TarSNAP. But
I know Bitcoin people that print out some of their Bitcoin addresses on paper too, and they put them like in a safety deposit box somewhere or something like that.
Yeah, or at least a fireproof box or something like that. Yeah.
What about like if it wasn't so critical, would maybe just a couple of flash keys be okay? What do you think?
Yep. The keys to access our encrypted credit card store for Scale Engine, 2 USB keys here on my desk.
Yeah. So there's definitely different approaches you could take to it. I like that he's thinking about this. If you guys have any suggestions or any tricks, like maybe this is a good use for LastPass or KeePass too, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, stuff like that can help. LastPass is a great thing for storing random things, like the serial number for my copy of Wirecast.
Right.
So that when I'm at a conference and I need this, for some reason, to type in the serial number for Wirecast on my laptop, I can have it instead of trying to find it in my email somewhere where they mailed it to me and so on.
I bet there's a lot of good ideas out there. TechSNAP.reddit.com. There'll be a feedback thread for 220. And
but I definitely know what it means because I have VPN, Mumble, TeamSpeak, TarSNAP,
all of them.
SSH keys for work, SSH keys for FreeBSD, SSH keys for GitHub, all kinds of stuff. My GPG keys, I have a separate GPG key for FreeBSD now. All that crazy stuff.
Yeah, GPG keys, yeah. All right, if you have a question for the TechSNAP program, go to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click the contact link, and choose TechSNAP from the drop-down, or email us directly, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com. I also mentioned that subreddit. It's another great place, techsnap.reddit.com. Most people use the contact form, though, because then you know that the monkeys just automatically deliver it to us, and that's kind of nice. And the subreddit's good, too, because then if we don't get a chance to answer it, not only do you still have a good chance that there's going to be community input, but usually in the subreddit, it jumps out at us closer than the email does. So that's if you really got a question that needs to get answered, techsnap.reddit.com. All right, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup has stories that just didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them and give you some links to read up on your own after the show. And some of these links potentially could theoretically have come from our subreddit over at techsnap.reddit.com. Alan, brace yourself. This first story makes me want to smack my head so hard. Facepalm, like an aggressive facepalm, Samsung.
Double facepalm.
Yeah, is deliberately disabling Windows updates. Now here's a great thing because you get SW update and it downloads an update literally called disable_Windows update.exe. How about that?
Yeah. So the story on that one is a user on the forum where the author of this blog post does his work was having a problem where his Windows update kept getting disabled. So eventually they used the Windows auditing policy framework to log every time the registry got changed and for the Windows update key, and eventually trace it back to this disable_Windows update.exe, which apparently actually comes with the Samsung software updater.
Yeah, and I guess like the basic rumor on the street is that Samsung was having some problems with Windows updating drivers, causing tech support issues. So Samsung thought, you know what we're gonna do? Just turn off Windows Update, and we'll give them updates. We'll do the updates. Yeah, and they got caught red-handed about it. I'm sure Microsoft made a phone call. You know what's amazing about this? What was it, 2 weeks ago?
I thought like the whole Windows UAC was supposed to prevent things like a malicious application from being able to disable Windows Update.
Oh, that's a good point. No, I was going to point out that Microsoft has a serious problem with their OEMs undermining the security of their operating system. There's nobody more qualified to provide patches for the platform than the platform vendor. That's Microsoft. Okay, so what was it? 3 weeks ago, we had the Lenovo Superfish or whatever the hell it was, where they're intercepting SSL traffic. This is, so now we have Samsung and we have Lenovo that are really damaging the security of Microsoft customers' computers. Now, really, Samsung sees everybody as Samsung customers, and they don't see Microsoft as anything but other than the software provider. But Microsoft has got to get their crap together with their OEMs, because Windows is still a crap show because of these guys.
Well, it's the same thing with Android, right? It's mostly the handset vendors that are causing all the problems.
I guess so.
And the fragmentation and so on.
Yeah, I guess so. Hey, guess what? Big news story about Adobe Flash and a 0 day. Surprise.
Yeah, 0 day being used. FireEye found it being used by one of the big APT teams. And so the details have been given to Adobe, and they've done a 0 day patch. So you need to hurry up and install that patch, because this 0 day exploit is being actively used in the wild by attackers.
Good times. Good times. All right. Linked for the info on that in the show notes. Now, this isn't did I open this Adobe one? There's not two Adobe ones in a row, right?
No.
Okay, good. Then we'll talk about Google and the fact that it was forced to hand over information about Jacob Appelbaum. This is kind of revealing, isn't it?
Yes, during the WikiLeaks grand jury investigation.
Yeah, and so Jacob Appelbaum is he's been involved with the creation of Tor. Obviously, he's connected to WikiLeaks. He's worked for the State Department, and it looks like Google fought it for a little while too. And then, but eventually they had to give in, and they weren't allowed to notify Jacob about it either.
Yep, exactly.
They had to keep
and
it
this
secret.
is the problem with these privacy invasion gag order things that the government does.
I love this next story. It comes from Computer World. 1 in 3 data center servers is a zombie.
See, they misused the term there, because they don't actually mean zombie as in it's part of a botnet.
Yeah, okay.
They just mean that 1 in 3 servers in data centers are powered on but are not actually doing anything and haven't done anything for 6 months.
I could believe that.
Then part of it, I imagine, is capacity stuff.
You never know, right? You might need it.
And redundancy. You know, you got to have a second database server in case the first one goes down or whatever. But even though most times those would be considered to be doing something if they're replicating
Or maybe one's
stuff
staging or development and one's production, and you don't do a lot of staging and
But even
development.
then, I imagine they'll do something at least once every 6 months.
You'd hope.
But they say one of the other interesting things is that the number of about 30% idle servers appears to be about the same as it was going back to 2008 even. So as we've added more and more servers, we've kept the number of idle servers about the same.
Even though I don't think we've had an official announcement that it was China that was behind it, officials are saying to the Washington Post that Chinese had access to the U.S. security clearance data for a year. This is back to that Office of Personnel Management breach.
Right, and going back to the first one where one of their subcontractors was breached. This was probably before OPM was actually hacked, but that the Chinese have had access to this data for a long time.
That makes sense, yeah. That I got you there.
But the next one also makes quite a bit of sense. So Bruce Schneier wrote up over at Wired.com a response to a headline from another less responsible publication where they said, China and Russia have access to the Snowden docs, and basically say that China and Russia somehow hacked the encrypted store of the way that Snowden had encrypted the documents, which most likely isn't true. But Schneier says that China and Russia almost definitely do have the Snowden docs because they would either have managed to steal them from the reporters' computers. Because, as we saw from these docs, even in 2008, the NSA had ways of stealing stuff from your computer when it wasn't even hooked up to the internet, let alone other stuff, right?
All right, this is their job, too.
Yeah, exactly. And so they most likely will have stolen the documents from the reporters and other people that had them, not from Snowden, because as Schneier explains in the article, Snowden doesn't have access to the documents and had given up access to them before he even got to Russia, so he couldn't have given them to the Russians.
So it was they're still encrypted, though.
Yeah. But, no matter how much, as Schneier's like, I have access to these documents, and I'm a paranoid cryptographer, and even I'm not sure that they haven't managed to steal them from me.
Yeah.
And then the other thing he says, it's also probably likely that the Chinese have managed to steal them from the NSA before Snowden did.
Yeah, very possible. So I think it was the Sunday Times that, the Sunday Times, Corky says, that wrote that. And the guy that...
their headline didn't make any sense. Like, just from a technical standpoint,
that guy was
wrong.
we rolled it in Unfiltered 2 weeks ago. That guy was later interviewed by CNN, and I don't know if you saw this. You probably didn't. So the guy that wrote that article literally said word for word that he has no proof of what he wrote, and that he wrote what the government told him to write. He says that in the interview. So, yeah, you can take it for whatever you want to take it for. All right, Mr. Jude, let's move on in the roundup because we got a Cisco story to talk about, everybody. The default SSH key found in many Cisco security appliances. What, just a default? They all share it? What?
Yeah, so basically there's one SSH key that's in the authorized keys file of every one of these Cisco appliances.
Why not?
So somebody ever got this key that apparently Cisco has, they would have unlimited root access to every one of the security devices.
Remember, folks, you're paying for that Cisco quality.
This is for the remote support thing. Yeah. So they can log into your box if you ask them to.
That Cisco support quality.
On by default.
All right, this next one comes from Brookings, the Brookings Institute. Now, this is really? Okay. If you can't keep hackers out, find and remove them faster. Now, that's an interesting idea.
Yes. So this is Richard Belcherk, who's a very well-respected security researcher. And yeah, basically his point is, it's not always possible to stop hackers from breaking into your system. So what you have to do is be able to find out when they have and get them out of there before it's been a year, like in the case of the OPM.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, move faster because it's going to happen. I guess it's sort of their take.
So basically the point is that you can't rely on just keeping people out. You have to detect when they do get in and kick them back out quickly.
All right. So we were talking about this earlier, too. Popular security software came under relentless NSA and GCHQ attacks. This one is kind of interesting. The GCHQ got a legal warrant, and that's how we're finding out about this, is the warrant has been released from Snowden docs from a few years ago. And they went after Kaspersky Labs starting in 2008. And they say the personal security products such as the Russian antivirus software Kaspersky continue to pose a challenge to GCHQ's computer network exploitations capabilities, and is essential in order to be able to exploit such software and prevent detection of our activities. They also want to prevent being detected. Examination of this is in the warrant. Examination of Kaspersky and other such products continues. The warrant renewal request also states that the GCHQ reverse engineers antivirus programs to assess their fitness for government. So they get, and this is a yearly or something like that renewal that they get. And they talk about also the NSA and how they target. The NSA is targeting Nod32 and ESET. On here is AVG, this being targeted by the NSA. Checkpoint, the firewall makers. Dr. Web, Bitdefender, F-Secure, and others are all being targeted by the NSA. Good times. Not surprising, I guess. Although it's interesting to see McAfee and Symantec being left off that list. Maybe they have another arrangement. Mm-hmm.
Maybe they provide the source code directly to the NSA.
Yeah, exactly. They just have a partnership program. You were kind of hinting at this just a few minutes ago. Stealing data from a PC, like encryption keys, even though it's not connected to anything.
So this one's actually not related to that, but this is research from Tel Aviv. In Israel, that uses software-defined radios to detect stuff. So basically, they have a software-defined radio USB stick connected to an antenna and a little 15-centimeter loop of coax cable.
Yeah.
And by holding that within 15 centimeters of your laptop, if they send you an encrypted email and you decrypt it with your GPG key, through that antenna, they can steal your GPG key. In just a couple of seconds. An older version of this attack required hours of stuff, but this one can do it in a couple seconds.
Yeah, it's like, what, $300 worth of parts?
Yeah, it's like $250 worth of parts. And they show the whole thing bundled up and sitting on top of a pita for some reason.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's like, it's the size of a pita.
And so they can just set this next to the computer and just pull it off over.
Yeah, and record it and then later analyze it to steal your key. Mm-hmm. But basically, it causes your computer to do certain types of multiplication at a certain time, and it can detect the variance in the RF coming off your processor. And by doing that, can figure out what your key is, apparently.
Fascinating. Huh?
They've also designed a version that can use a little handheld AM radio with a cable plugged into your phone to let your phone do the analysis. So using a HTC Evo 4G phone and a little like $10 AM radio, they're able to do the thing without looking nearly as conspicuous. Because apparently the The signal leakage happens at around 1.7 megahertz, which is in the range of commercial AM radio.
Okay, Alan, help me with this next one. Is it Sakinia? How do you say this one?
I think it's Sakunia.
Sakunia? Oh, yeah, that looks right.
Something like that.
Tell me about this.
So they're basically a website where you've been able to go and read about security vulnerabilities when they come out, and they have a commercial offering where they offer vulnerability intelligence,
advisories,
management,
like
and so on.
Yeah.
Right. They're changing the way their website works so that if you're not a member, you don't see vulnerabilities that are less than 9 months old. They're saying that frequently they encounter organizations engaged in wrongful use of the Sakunia advisories. So basically, the license was that you're not allowed to use the advisories for commercial purposes without paying them by being a member, and people were apparently doing it anyway. And so now you have to sign up as a community member or pay as a corporate member in order to get access to the vulnerabilities. Or anything more than 9 months old is available on the website for free.
Okay. Alan Jude, Web App Spotter. Look at this. It's a regex editor.
Yes.
For your browser.
So I had to write a ridiculous regular expression. It was the first time I've ever used a negative look behind, which basically says, only match if before this string does not appear. Or this regular expression, this subpart of the regular expression doesn't appear anywhere before this point in the expression. And most of the JavaScript-based engines like this, there are tons of websites like this out there, but almost all of them are just use raw JavaScript. And so when you go to put this negative look behind in, they're like, sorry, JavaScript doesn't support negative look behinds. Whereas this one did. So I was like, ooh, helpful.
Interesting, Alan.
And
cool.
Someone in the chat room's like, what's the URL? I always use regex 101. I'm like, yes, it's regex 101.
Yeah, it's regex 101.
Because the other one I found was regexer.com.
Yeah.
And it was pretty good, but it didn't break down the matches as nicely. And if they were long, they were cut off with ellipsis. So, yes, regex 101 is really nice.
All right, Alan, this next one makes me shake my head. It looks like Android apps downloaded more than 200 million times may fail to properly encrypt their HTTPS traffic. In dozens of different types of Android apps, it could be a defect in how they implement HTTPS. What do we know?
Some of them don't use HTTPS at all. Some of them do and do it wrong.
Yeah.
And so they have an example here of actually being able to suck the password out and spit it out on the window. So
look at that.
Random app developers, turns out, are not security experts.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about...
just have no clue what they're doing.
What do you think about... I don't know the details on how the hell they're doing this, but in iOS 9, Apple is going to have developers use a system-level SSL implementation where the app developers won't be writing SSL. I don't actually understand exactly how it works because it seems like...
a library.
But it seems like also then a single point to decrypt everything. I don't know exactly how it works, but so that's apparently what I grokked from following their presentation on it was their idea is that way individual developers are not implementing things like secure protocols and things like that.
Well, yeah, because in general, individual developers shouldn't be trying to implement HTTPS themselves. There are standard libraries for that, and they're already there. I don't know why they were trying to do it. Now, when you want to do direct SSL, not for HTTP, yes, you have this problem, and the OpenSSL APIs are horrible, and that's part of the point of the Libre SSL is they're actually making a libTLS system where you'll actually be able to talk to it in a more human-friendly way. But yeah, it's hard to say.
All right, we touched on this one already, but it's in the roundup if you want to read more. The U.S. Navy's warfare systems will just stay on XP, and they paid millions to do it.
They paid $9.1 million so far, and the contract could extend up to 2017 and cost $30 million.
Yeah, $30.8 million. Wow, for XP, that's not worth it. Not worth it. All right, now tell me about this next one. Is it a robot?
The robots. So we've talked a little bit before about the Sony Aibo little dog robot and how they stopped making them and stopped selling replacement parts. And so, there's a whole industry out there about trying to bodge them back together or cannibalizing broken ones to get parts to fix ones that are still working.
Yeah.
Well, this kind of raises the question about the next generation of robots because SoftBank is set to release their children robots. The first one's called Pepper, and eventually the idea is that people would have these like kids. And then what will people do when spare parts for their child can only be gotten by cannibalizing other children?
Oh my gosh.
Sounds like good sci-fi to me.
It does. Yeah, it really does.
You know, it reminds you of those like sci-fi stories and so on of, you know, parents having an extra kid just to use it as an organ donor for their first kid that's sick or whatever.
Morbid. That's morbid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
what do you think of this one? Google, Microsoft, Mozilla, and others team up
WebKit.
to launch WebAssembly, a new binary format for the web.
yeah, I'm not entirely sure if this is actually becoming a binary format or it's just a way to compile C down into bytecode JavaScript. So if it ends up running in JavaScript, I suppose it kind of makes sense.
They say a new binary format for compiling applications for the web. The new format is meant to allow programmers to compile their code for the browser, currently focused on C and C++ with other languages to follow, where it is then executed inside a JavaScript engine. Instead of having to parse the full code, though, which can often take quite time, WebAssembly can be decoded significantly faster.
Right. So, yeah, the biggest problem with JavaScript is that you get it as the source code and you have to compile it first before you can run it. Whereas compiled, you know, it'd be useful. But yeah, so this basically be
What could go wrong?
Yeah, basically, here's a bunch of binary blobs. Please just run them.
Yeah. What's
although it's not like anybody's looking at the JavaScript before it runs in the browser anyway. So, but you should check out a recent BSD Now episode where we talked about Cloud ABI, which was it's a fake operating system. So it's not really an operating system, but it's registered as one. And it's basically a binary you compile with Clang or whatever, and it will run on any of the supported operating systems.
Fancy.
So a binary you could make once that'll run on FreeBSD, NetBSD, Linux, etc. And you know, eventually maybe it'll support Windows. And in that case, you would then have the single binary that could run anywhere.
Our next story, is this a follow-up to somebody who participated in the HP disclosure program?
This is
Or they got a bounty?
HP's been running what they call the 0-day initiative for a long time. And so they're actually looking back at how it's gone so far and kind of giving a rundown of it.
Okay.
You know, they say so far they've paid $125,000 to various things. They announced that their team won $125,000 for a Microsoft mitigation bypass bounty and the Blue Hat bounty for defense, and talked about a bunch of other stuff. This is partly related to the one we had before about Microsoft's ASLR stuff, and where HP had a bypass for that, kind of found in tandem with Google's. But basically, they talk about how it's been running the 0-day initiative and basically doing like Google's Project Zero, having a bunch of researchers paid to work on this stuff. And also how they're doing a 120-day disclosure timeline instead of 90 days like Google. And, you know, the different problems they've run into and what things are working, what's not, and so on. And, you know, why they choose to disclose stuff when they find it.
Good find, Alan.
Specifically, the one vulnerability that they did find is like, they told Microsoft about it, and Microsoft isn't willing to fix it. So now that it's been 120 days, they're releasing it anyway. And they say, since Microsoft feels that these issues do not impact the default configuration of Internet Explorer and thus affect a large number of consumers, it is their judgment not worth their resources and the potential regression risk. HP disagrees with that opinion and are releasing a proof of concept information to the community in the belief that concerned users should be fully informed as to possible, you know, what measures they can take to prevent this from happening to them, and maybe somebody can advance the vulnerability to the point where Microsoft will care enough to fix it.
All right, now I think I know which one you're referring to. 5 spy technologies that can't be stopped by going offline. 5 cyber spy technologies. I like this graphic they have of clipping the Ethernet too. So electromagnetic spying is one of them. Okay.
Yep, that's Tempest, which is kind of the thing we just showed, except for Tempest cost a lot of money, and the other one was $250 in a PITA.
Right. Sits on a PITA. Yeah.
They also have lasers. You know, for example, a accelerometer in a smartphone resting near the keyboard provides approximately 80% recognition of your typing, and so on. Listening to the radio, you know, intercepting keyboard input is not always useful, obviously, but you know, the Stuxnet worm, and they talk about what you can do with radios, and also using heat. It's like often air-gapped computers tend to actually sit near not air-gapped computers, And the motherboard temperature sensor on the one computer might actually be able to detect disturbances from the other one that's only a couple inches away from it.
Jeez.
Apparently up to 15 inches.
Wow.
And then they also talk about, if, in a classic well-shielded room, it doesn't necessarily guarantee data leakage protection, right? So even if it's got like a Faraday cage and no signals are getting out of it, that stops electromagnetic noise from like RF and so on, but it doesn't stop ultrasonic sound. So in the case of an ultrasonic technology, spy equipment can be represented as two compact units, one that's plugged into the computer that you're spying from, and one that's plugged in outside the room but nearby, that doesn't even need power. It actually gets powered by the ultrasonic signal coming from inside the room.
Jeez.
And apparently they've got transfer speeds of up to 12 megabytes a second, which is plenty to steal data. And I'd love to have ultrasonic 12 megabytes a second. That's if they mean megabytes, that's 100 megabits.
I would love to have anything possible in my house powered by ultrasonic sound waves. Anything. Like, let's start with the... Wow, okay. All right, fine. Keep it above me. Let's start with the smoke detectors. Can I not have to replace the battery in the smoke detector at 3 a.m., please? That would be nice.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool.
I don't know. The only ultrasonic thing I have in my house are some things
Toothbrushes?
in the basement that keep the rodents out.
Oh, yeah,
They emit an ultrasonic sound, and then I've not had another mouse since.
Yeah, those are neat, yeah. All right, Alan, guess what? That brings us to the end of the TechSNAP program.
There's one more link.
Oh, you know what? After all of that, that was the one that I dropped. All right, you start and I'll pick it up.
It's just a Twitter cartoon.
Oh, I got it. Hold on. I'm reading it. You can start it. I'll pull it up right now. There we go. I like the... this comes from Dan Kaminsky, you think is how you say it?
Yes, who's a famous security researcher. And you know how in all the various examples of like how cryptography works, there's like Alice and Bob, and then the bad guy is like E for evil or Mallory for malicious and so on. And so this one's like, it shows Ugg, the caveman, signaling with smoke signals.
Yeah.
And then it says, until one day when the mischievous caveman Kaminsky moved in next door to Ugg and started sending smoke signals too.
And they look the same.
It's like, now we need an authentication system to tell who's actually sending the message, because Kaminsky can obviously pretend to be Ugg by sending a smoke signal from near his house.
A very complicated technical problem explained with smoke signals.
And cavemen.
Yeah. That's a good one. I'm glad we caught that one. All right, so now that brings us to the end of the TechSNAP program. We'd love to have you join us live. We do this show live, jblive.tv, at 1 p.m. on Thursdays, which is...
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Yeah, and that's Pacific, 1 p.m. You can also go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar and just have it automatically converted to your local time zone. Don't forget the feedback.
Which does make your life easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can actually just add it to your Google Calendar, too. Feedback, TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com, or use the contact form at the subreddit, techsnap.reddit.com. And then, of course, the pro tip, the RSS feeds. You go grab those right below the download links in the show notes, and then you just get the show automatically every single week when you grab the RSS feed. Oh, I suppose also I could mention all of the copious links and notes Alan's added in the show notes. Those are also on that same page. You just scroll down a little bit further, and links to everything we talked about today will be there. All right, Mr. Jude, have a great week, and thank everybody out there. I want to thank you. I'm thanking you so much for tuning this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next week.